But I will say in the last year, I do think my stance on the college football playoff has evolved, and I am in favor of limited expansion. And let me explain why. There's two reasons, and there's two very important reasons. The first thing is recruiting in college football has completely changed over the last 5, 6, 7 years. It has hurt the sport, and as a byproduct, we are getting the same teams in the college football playoff anymore, okay? So basically what I just did was I gave you the reason behind the problem first. The problem that college football has right now is every single year it's Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. Oklahoma's right on the cusp, Georgia's right on the cusp, and then there's pretty much a big gap with everybody else. Now, can an LSU jump up in any given year? Of course. Can a Notre Dame in a given year step up? Of course. But in general, the gap between the top of the sport and even the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th best teams in the country, it's expanding every year. Why is that happening? It is because college football recruiting has become national as opposed to regional. What do I mean by that? What I mean is essentially college football has a chicken and an egg problem. And college football's chicken and egg problem is this. You need really good players to compete at the highest level of college football. The problem is now that we are 6, 7 years into the playoff, all the good players want to go to 1, 2, 3 programs because they know that's the only chance that they have to get on that stage. So let me just explain it to you in the simplest form. Think about college football going into next year. First of all, I told you on Monday's episode. Right now, I can tell you pretty much definitively 4 of the 4 playoff spots. I believe at least 3 are already punched among 4 teams. I believe Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma. At least 3 of those teams will make the college football playoff, maybe all 4. Okay, but why is that happening? It is because college football recruiting has become national, and now the best players aren't staying in their part of the country. They're not spread out. They're going to the best programs. Don't believe me? Let's take a look. Alabama, going to enter the season, reigning national champion, potential number 1 team in the country. You know who their quarterback is? Bryce Young. You know where he's from? The town I'm sitting in right now, Pasadena, California. Could have gone to USC, probably would have. It's a little bit of a BS narrative, but could have gone to USC, ends up at Alabama instead of staying in the Pac-12 footprint. DJ Uiagalelei, the quarterback at Clemson, he stepped in for Trevor Lawrence last year. You know where he's from? California. Georgia, starting quarterback, JT Daniels. You know where he's from? California. Now, I understand that it's a little bit of a BS narrative with JT Daniels because he did start his career at USC, but he transferred. And then finally, Oklahoma, Spencer Rattler. You know where he's from? Arizona. So think about that. Of the 5 true contenders going into college football next year, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Georgia, 4 of those teams have quarterbacks who are from the Pac-12 footprint. I'm not saying all 4 should have stayed. One of them was here and had to transfer out. What I am saying is it is clear that there is a loss of talent in the Pac-12 footprint to these major programs. On top of that, don't forget, I've said it before, Ohio State's best wide receiver, Chris Olave. Where's he from? San Diego. LSU's number 2 corner who will be in the NFL. Where's he from? California. Clemson has a wide receiver, Joseph Ngata, from California. And so what I'm saying is, I'm not saying this should be a participation trophy for the Pac-12. I'm not saying that we should just let them in because we feel bad for them. But I do think the way the college football playoff is set up, where it's only these 2, 3, 4 teams that are getting in, all these West Coast kids are looking around saying, man, if I don't leave the West Coast, I will not play in the college football playoff. I will not get proper exposure, and I will not get, frankly, the credit that I deserve. And so when I look at the idea of college football playoff expansion, this is reason number 1. I should mention, it's not just the Pac-12 footprint. Ohio State's second best wide receiver last year, some would say the best wide receiver, one was Chris Olave from San Diego. You know who number 2 was? Garrett Wilson from Texas. On top of that, you know where a bunch of Alabama's best recruits came from this year? They had 2 offensive linemen ranked at the top of the class from Texas. You go on and on down the list. Guys in the Big 12 footprint are now going to Alabama, to Ohio State. Baron Browning, their top linebacker from the Big 12 footprint. And so again, I'm not saying that this has to be a participation trophy for the every team in the Big 12 besides Oklahoma or the Pac-12, but what I am saying is this. The reason I am in favor of expansion is pretty simple. It is because of the fact that it now makes it a little bit more likely that we flatten the curve in college football in recruiting. Why is that? It's because now Oregon can go into a kid's home. USC can go into a kid's home. Texas can go into a kid's home. Baylor can go into a kid's home. North Carolina, even if you will, can go into a kid's home and say, you know what? You don't just have to go to Clemson. You don't just have to go to Ohio State. You're a SoCal kid. Come to Southern California. You're going to have a chance to compete for a playoff berth. And if we get in the playoff, let's show those punks from Ohio State or Clemson or Alabama where the real football is played. I'm not, again, I hope you guys understand. I'm not saying that like we should feel bad for the Pac-12, but what I am saying is I do think college football playoff expansion, it will lead to a more of a spreading out of the talent where we won't get the same 2, 3, 4 teams in the college football playoff every year. And by the way, this shouldn't just matter for Pac-12 fans. This should matter for a Florida fan, for a Texas A&M fan, for an LSU fan that is trying to rise up those SEC rankings and consistently compete with Alabama, Georgia. I do think if we flatten the curve a little bit flatten the curve, not the appropriate time for flatten the curve, but if we do kind of flatten the playing field in recruiting, I do think it'll be better for college football as a whole, and it will allow different teams to get in. So that's the first reason that I have been in favor of expansion. The second reason I am in favor of expansion, and I never thought I'd say this, it's because of the little guy. And if you follow me and if you know my work and if you're familiar with who I am and what I do, I am not like a big proponent of like, we got to let the little guy in. Like, it's not like if Cincinnati had been in the college football playoff last year, they would have beaten Alabama and beaten Clemson and won the national championship. Like, that would not have happened, okay? They went to the Sugar Bowl. They lost to a Georgia team that wasn't even at full strength, but they played well. So why do I believe that we need to expand for the little guy? It is for this simple reason. It is because there is something – college football is the only sport in which you can do what you're supposed – so the whole point of sports – and sorry, I'm tripping over my own words, but I'm so fired up right now. So let's go back to the little guy, okay? I'm not saying that Cincinnati would have beaten Alabama. I'm not saying they would have beaten Clemson if they had gotten to the playoff. But there is something kind of anti-why we play sports about the little guy in college football, right? It's the only sport that I know of where you can win all your games. The whole point of sports is to win games. Remember, Herm Edwards, we play to win the game. Well, you play all your games and you're Cincinnati or UCF or Boise State or San Diego State or whoever, and you don't even get a shot at the championship. That doesn't seem fair to me. And so because of it, that's why I'm also in favor of expansion. Get all 5 conferences an automatic bid, get the group of 5 an automatic bid, and give them a legitimate shot. So when all those kids buckle up their chin straps at the start of the season, they are competing for the same thing that Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson are. Are they really? Probably not, in the same way that Mississippi Valley State in basketball is not competing for the same thing as Duke in basketball. But at the same time, Mississippi Valley State gets to show up in the first day of practice and say, you know what? If we do what we're supposed to do, we are going to play in the NCAA tournament. And I feel like Cincinnati, Central Florida, all of these programs should be provided the same opportunity. And last year was the first year that my opinion flipped on this. And let me explain why. It is because if you go back to last year was the first time that I really actually did legitimately feel bad for the little guy. And the reason was, if you remember, in the college football playoff rankings every week, it was the first time I've ever seen where they actively tried to punish the group of 5 teams. And if you remember back to last year, and I remember doing this rant vividly as long as the day is long, whatever the old saying is, Cincinnati, they had 2 games canceled because of COVID back-to-back. They kept falling in the rankings every single week. They were being punished for not playing. At the same time, Ohio State, what did they play? 5 games, 6 games in the regular season, never dropped out of the top 3, maybe the top 4. The point being, the committee was going out of their way to make sure that not only was Cincinnati not going to make the playoff, they weren't even going to have the opportunity to play their way in. And so those are the 2 main reasons that I believe we need to expand the playoff. Is one, because I do think it helps level the playing field a little bit in college football. And again, it's not just a Pac-12 thing. It should, in theory, help Florida, Tennessee, Georgia Tech, all these teams that are trying to fight to get to the top of their conference. The second reason, the little guy. Here is my concern, though. We talk about a 12-team playoff? A 12-team playoff? Are you kidding me? I'm not a fan. I am a fan, as I said, of the 8-team college football playoff for the reason that I just said. It allows for teams to get in from all over the country, small schools, big schools, whatever. But there is also sort of an exclusivity to it. Now, will you be able to argue third, fourth, fifth best team in the SEC is better than the group of 5 champ? Of course. Absolutely. But there is still some exclusivity to it. And my biggest concern is when you go to 12 teams, I do think it hurts the regular season a little bit. And let me explain but I don't know why I keep saying let me explain. But let me explain. So the thing about me, and you guys know this, I love this show. I love doing this show. I love doing radio. I'm very passionate, and I love sports. But I'm also a realist in that sports right now are very fragmented, and it's hard to follow all of them. You can't be a national NHL fan and also watch the NBA and also watch college basketball and also watch Major League Baseball and all. Like, you just can't. There's not enough hours in the day. And I bring this up because if you look across sports right now, the single biggest problem that I would argue every sport other than the NFL, which is once a week, and college football, which is once a week and has the most urgency of any sport all season long, outside of those two sports, the regular season is kind of irrelevant in all these other sports. I'm watching the NBA playoffs. I'm loving the NBA playoffs. I'm having fun. I'm enjoying myself. But you can't deny that during the NBA regular season, it's really hard to get into the NBA regular season because hey, it doesn't really matter if Brooklyn wins tonight. It doesn't really matter if the Lakers win tonight. When playoffs come, they're going to be one of the 2 best teams. They're going to be locked and loaded. Major League Baseball, same thing. There's just too many games. College basketball, you guys know I love college basketball. I'm watching Bama, Florida on a Tuesday night. I'm watching Utah State, San Diego State, late West Coast, Mountain West basketball. I'm not asking for like a pat on the back, but what I'm saying is I do it because it's my job, but I understand that you guys as normal people don't have time to do that. And so I bring this up as it pertains to college football because this is the one problem that every sport except for the NFL and college football has is how do you create urgency in the regular season? And college football does that better than anybody. And so my concern with going to a 12-team playoff is that I do think it dilutes the regular season a little bit. And I know a lot of people say, oh, they said that about the BCS. They said that about a 4-team playoff. But a 12-team playoff? Yeah, it is going to dilute the regular season. Just think about it. Think back to last year's SEC championship game. Bama, Florida. Ironically, that was actually the toughest game that Bama played all year. Bama loses that game, they're probably still in the playoff. But Florida needed to win that game to even be considered for the college football playoff, and they were frankly on the outside looking in because they had lost to LSU the week before. Why do I bring that up? It's because, think about it. Imagine going into an SEC championship game, which is regularly probably one of the, frankly, the 5 biggest sporting events of the year outside of the NFL. Like, when you really think about ratings, the SEC championship game is right up there with the college football playoff, NBA finals, Final Four in terms of fan interest and excitement. But now, if both those teams are going to get into the playoff, I don't know that people are going to be as interested in watching. Are people going to be as fired up about LSU Bama if they know that it's only going to affect playoff seeding, but both these teams are still going to be in? Same with Ohio State, Penn State. Same with Texas, Oklahoma. Same with Clemson, Notre Dame. All of these games, college football creates so much urgency. And so what I worry about with 12 teams, when you're talking about a second or third, frankly, mostly a third SEC team, when you're talking about a second ACC team, when we all know Clemson's by far the best team, why do I need to see some other crappy ACC team when I know Clemson's the best? Why do I need to see some crappy Big Ten team when I know Ohio State's the best? You go to 8, you have 6 automatic bids, the 5 power conferences, ACC, SEC, Big 12, Big 10, Pac-12. You give the group of 5, which is the small schools, Cincinnati, whoever, a spot. And then you have 2 at-larges. And then if Georgia and Alabama go undefeated in the regular season and one of them loses in the SEC championship game, then you put them in. Whatever. The point I'm trying to make, you go to 12. I do worry about the sanctity of the regular season. As my voice is cracking again, I'm sorry, I'm so fired up. But I will tell you this, it is going to be fascinating. what I would just say really quickly, I want to get to the Pangos stuff in a minute. But before I get to Pangos, what I would just say is I do think this is going to happen. This is coming. College football playoff expansion is on the horizon. And I would just say, I'm not opposed to it. I think it's finally time. I think we need it to get other programs involved besides Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. But at the same time, I do think 12 teams is too much. Let's just stick with 8.